Good afternoon, and welcome to the Real Estate Markets Post-Hurricanes program. We very much appreciate your taking the time to speak with us. We know others are coming on, but out of respect for your time, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Budge Husky, and I'm privileged to serve as President and CEO of Premier Sotheby's International Real Estate. And it's my pleasure to be able to kick off this program that will provide valuable information and insights from some of the top professionals in the real estate industry. Let me just start off by saying, as many joining today will have recently experienced the devastating impact of Ian, we want to begin by acknowledging the extent of personal losses that are attributable to the event, and particularly the storm surge, which many of us experienced firsthand. And we extend our best wishes to each of you for a speedy recovery in the days and months ahead. Many of us, as I mentioned, are right with you on that journey based on our own personal situation. And as a company, we have already provided over $50,000 of funds to date for various relief efforts as we rebuild our paradise together. I know Jeff may comment in a little while about what we're doing specifically on the island of Sanibel in terms of further assistance to that community there. So the host of the program and the two who really put it all together are two experts with extensive history on the Gulf Coast who rank among our very best at Premier Sotheby's, and who in fact were just recognized nationally as among the top 100 within our global brand. And that's Jeff and Tiffany Burns. Joining them are additional experts in our Sotheby's family from other markets who Jeff will introduce in just a moment. And we so appreciate their taking the time to lend their talent and expertise. Now, just so everybody knows, we are in a webinar mode, which means only the panelists will be seen or heard. We do welcome your questions and will endeavor to address as many as possible as we move through the program. So you should, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, have a Q&A that you can input or type in any questions that you wish. And again, we'll attempt to get to as many as we can within the time allowed. So again, thank you so very much for joining us. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Jeff. And Jeff, it's all yours. Thanks again.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for all you out there tuning in. As we all discuss this post-hurricane, what's going to happen, what has happened in the past. This came about because, as you know, most of you probably hopefully know, Tiffany and I, we've been asked by quite a few neighbors, friends, customers, what are we to expect after what just happened with Hurricane Ian? We all know, the devastation it brought to our area. They're curious about property values. And so we thought, well, what a better way to try to, sort through this together than ask other experts who've been through similar situations as us. And, what were their experiences from not only a personal level, but also a professional real estate level? What do their markets look like? So I have some really, really great panelists. We reached out to some people we thought were, very, very experienced, well-known, well-respected real estate agents in their communities who have been through major hurricanes, and they were happy to help, and they were happy to lend their advice. So I'd like to introduce our panel to you here. I'm going to start with Chris Abbott. Chris Abbott is broker owner of Scenic, Sotheby's International Realty out of the Florida Panhandle. And he's been through quite a few hurricanes. He's been through Hurricane Katrina in 2005 and Hurricane Michael. That was Mexico City Beach. We remember all those videos that we saw, the devastation there. That was in 2018. And so Chris is going to talk about those experiences and add some insight. So thanks for joining us, Chris. And then we have Dana Olejniczak. Did I say that right, Dana? Okay, good. Dana Olejniczak is with, she's a Hall of Fame and Circle of Excellence member with Martha Turner's Sotheby's International Realty. And she's out of Texas and specifically the Houston area, correct, Dana? Yep. So the Houston area is Hurricane Harvey, as we remember. That was 2017. And that was an interesting one because, other than Miami on the East Coast, well, actually Superstorm Sandy, that's a hurricane that made landfall and affected a very, very large metropolitan city. So we're happy you're here. I'm actually really interested to hear your stories as well. Then we have Chris Abbott, Chris Anthony. He's the Senior Vice President of northern markets with one Sotheby's International Realty, our neighbors on the east coast of Florida. So he was in the northeastern United States, and he has some really interesting stories from Superstorm Sandy. I know we all remember that. That's about 10 years ago, actually, which it doesn't seem that long ago, but it was about 10 years ago. So we have quite a host of experience here and a lot of information to go through. And then they also have some tips and hints for us, things that they wish they'd have known when they were going through their recovery process, and hopes that it helps all of us as we're 2 months out of Hurricane Ian in our coast. So let me start with, let's see here. Let's start with, let's go to the Chris Anthony here with Superstorm Sandy. So Chris, we were a little far away from that. I know we watched the news, but I wasn't anywhere near personally in 2012 when Superstorm Sandy hit. What was your level of devastation? Was there lots of property damage?
Yeah, there was tons, and it's crazy when you said it. I'm thinking about this. It was 10 years ago last month, and it seems like how could a decade have gone by? But yeah, it was. So I lived, and I started telling you guys earlier, I was on a barrier island, quite like what we're talking about, and the island was shut down for months, literally months. So you had to take a bus back and forth that was led and driven by a police officer, so you could go in and come out because people were looting and doing all kinds of things that they shouldn't have been doing. But ultimately, yeah, it was 10 years ago. We were on it was a small little beach town. You hear New Jersey, you don't think of a little beach town, but I lived in a quaint little beach town. I was on the bay, 3 blocks to the ocean. And I was about 10 blocks from the image that you guys might remember is where the roller coaster had fallen off the pier and fell right into the ocean. That was about 10 blocks from my house. And yeah, it was a crazy storm, but like many of us, we've been hearing from the Weather Channel over and over, oh, evacuate. And then you get 4 drops of rain and you're like, So we were some of the geniuses that did not evacuate. And luckily for us, my ex-brother-in-law was a police officer in town. So he kind of knew where we were at, and we all stayed in contact with each other. But when it started getting really bad, he picked us up and with our puppies and everything. And we went to the police station, and we ended up spending the night in the uniform closet of the Seaside Heights, New Jersey police station, which was fun.
Was there a lot of debris and damage around recovering the roads? Was it hard to traverse around your town?
Oh yeah. So just if you don't remember, I was in that spot where the ocean literally met the bay. So the island was covered in water. I still remember the thing that was most vivid in my brain 10 years later is I was in a beachfront house. I'll rewind. I lost, and it's all perspective, right? We had a fire a year and a half before Sandy, and it was devastating. And we weren't home, unfortunately. Our dogs were, and we lost our dogs in the fire. So that to me was the worst day of my life. The storm was more of a punch in the gut because I started saying, all right, well, something's good is going to come out of this. And, we'll rebuild the house, and we'll rebuild this house of our dreams. And we were to about sheetrock, and then Superstorm Sandy came in. So I lost my house twice in 18 months. I'm saying that because I ended up staying at a house on the beach because of the storm that night. We went to my ex's mom's house because we wanted to make sure she was okay. We were right on the boardwalk, right on the beach. And I started seeing debris shooting by the house. So if you can imagine, the ocean is here, the house is here on the boardwalk, and the street is right here. So it was starting to shoot through the boardwalk and through the street. Then I saw a concrete and wood bench that was on the boardwalk go by. It looked like a boat, and they're probably 400 pounds. That's when I started getting really scared and realizing this is going to be everything they're saying and then some. I went outside with my buddy and checked it all out, and then it started getting really bad, and we got out of Dodge. We went to the police station. But yeah, the ocean met the bay that day, and there were houses that were kind of like what you guys experienced. There were houses that were all over the place, houses in the middle of streets, cars that had moved, cars that went through houses, boats. There were more boats. It was a quaint beaching boat town. And there were so many boats that were all over the place in the middle of streets and everything. So it was, and I don't mean to sound like Debbie Downer, because it all eventually got better. And I'm sure we'll get into that later, but it's scary as hell in the beginning. And you just almost have to have a little blind faith that I promise you it will get better.
Can I ask you a quick question? Did you guys, we should know this, but do you have hurricane codes in New Jersey? Is that a requirement? I mean, for construction?
You broke up on me a little bit, Tiffany. Hurricane codes?
Were things built to code? Do you have hurricane codes for construction?
Not even close. They are now, but they weren't back then. No, and base flood elevation was something that pretty much nobody knew about unless you had a new construction house. It was really antiquated, and it was, there was a lot of things, on the base side you're at, or maybe a touch below sea level. And there were a lot of, 50-year-old houses that were built on the ground, basically, maybe with this much room between the ground and and it was the way it was. And the good news that came from all of this, which I'm sure we'll get into later, is that everything after this became built to code. And I say the one thing that I think lifted the whole town up, or the surrounding towns up, was that these little 2-bedroom, 1-bath beach bungalows became 4-bedroom, 2.5 beautiful houses that were built above base flood elevation. It took some time. It took a couple of years to get there, but I don't want to steal any thunder, but eventually it does get much, much better.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So I'm going to jump over to Dana here. So Dana, same question for you, because you were, you were Hurricane Harvey. That was 2017 over Houston. And that one actually brought a lot of water, didn't it?
Yes, 2 foot of water in 24 hours.
Oh,
It was out of 1,800 square foot, 18 square miles of Harris County, 70% of it was underwater. It was, and of 204,000 homes were damaged underwater, and 70% of those were out of the floodplain and did not have flood insurance. So it was a shock to everybody. And we were flooded out here in Kingwood in the middle of the night, which was even worse. Took people by surprise. Oh, well, y'all know it's devastating. Any water intrusion is scary, but it does go away. Thank goodness.
Yeah, that's what we learned, because we were down here and in business for Hurricane Charley in 2004, but we didn't get much of a storm surge. It was a little bit of a storm surge, but that was more of a wind event, and it was as devastating as it was. It seemed like we were back on the island within 14 days, and a couple months later, mostly back to normal. But it caught us with a storm surge. My house had actually 7.5 feet of water in the lower level. Wow. And it's the water. I personally didn't think we would see that on our coast, but it was just, all the negatives that could have happened in our storm. So
that's exactly right.
Was downtown Houston underwater as well?
Oh yeah, parts of downtown was underwater. It was all underwater. It looked like an ocean, and you'd see these little, every once in a while, you'd see a little overpass sticking up. It was devastating. And it even flooded. So another problem is some of the lakes, like Lake Conroe, Livingston, you're probably not aware, but that are far from, it wasn't the ocean. It wasn't that. It was really our lakes and our infrastructure that was overwhelmed with that much water that quickly, it couldn't drain. And so we had a situation where we're downstream from a huge lake, and it really wasn't Lake Houston, but Conroe feeds into there, and those people decided not to lower the water to allow for the water event that we were fixing to have. And then they panicked and let it all out at one time, and we were flooded downstream. San Jacinto flooded, and that's what flooded Kingwood. And most of our very high-end homes is the ones that flooded. And it was in the middle of the night. It was very scary. Oof. People were on the roofs trying to get out.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
Now, when you say flooded, so when those were 200,000 homes, that's unbelievable. Now, when those homes flooded, is that considered a total loss for people, or would they be able to rebuild, and how were they able to move back to homes, or for the most part?
Yes. We have a lot of two stories. So what a lot of people did it came in and came out because it was coming through a river. So it's ours did not sit for a long time. It was more of a rush, and then it subsided. So that was our saving grace in most of our homes. But a lot of people, depending on their age, decided the next morning, everybody in town was trying to help if we could get to them. We couldn't, our roads were underwater. So it just depends on where you were. If you had a boat, you could go help. Tore out everything the next day. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later, about what the process, and really down on 5 years after, we see, I wish we would have encouraged people to do this or that. But they did move back in. A lot of people lived upstairs and redid their downstairs. And some people decided just to take the insurance money and what they could salvage and leave. As I said, a lot of people didn't have flood insurance, and that was the problem.
That's too bad.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Abbott. So interesting, because I followed what happened in Mexico City Beach pretty closely, because that was Hurricane Michael, I believe, in 2018. You've been through, I mean, in the Panhandle area, you've been through a few hurricanes in your day, but the Mexico City Beach was the one that's kind of fresh in my memory as some devastation that I was unaccustomed to seeing. The pictures that came out of there were unbelievable. So were you living near there during Michael?
So I live in Santa Rosa Beach, which is about 40 miles west of Panama City, and Mexico Beach is a little farther east of there. One difference is the area that Michael hit is a Category 5 hurricane. There was not a lot of population and less dense than what you guys are dealing with now. So there was a lot of damage, but it was not to the same magnitude, but a lot of trees, a lot of natural disaster, and again, a Category 5 storm. We were just 40 miles west, so on the western side, which is rare for us when it comes to the Panhandle, and our damage was very minimal where we live. But every storm's got its own personality, right? So like you said, I'm native to the area. Hurricane Opal in 1995 was a Category 3 that hit Pensacola and crushed us on the east side. Ivan in 2004 was a Cat 3, also hit Pensacola, and we were on the east side. Dennis in 2005, and Katrina in 2005. Katrina wasn't a direct hit, but we had major beach erosion and storm surge, and a lot of refugees came over from Louisiana to us. And then, as you mentioned, Michael in 2018, and we had Sally in 2020, which was only a Cat 2 storm, but we had 25 plus inches of rain within 24 hours, and it caused major flooding in our area.
Yeah, so it's interesting, because what side of that eye you're on makes a big difference, as the hurricanes rotate counterclockwise, so unfortunately for us, when, Ian made landfall, it was Captiva Island was actually in the eye, and Sanibel and a little south of us, even to where Budge lives down in Barefoot Beach, down in Naples, we were on the south side of the storm, which means the winds were blowing onshore, which was pushing that big wall of water right over us. And, we saw a big storm surge that, we hadn't seen before. So I think they're saying in our area of homes, residential properties, 38% of them were older ground level homes, pre-firm, we call them, and they don't meet the base flood elevation. And I think every single home that was ground level on the island was filled with water. So, we have residents right now, we're still in the recovery phase, but we're in the muck out phase where people are still trying to get the wet stuff out of their house. Big FEMA piles on the side of the roads that these big trucks are still trying to come and pick up. So we're moving towards recovery now. To bring it back to our profession, I know at the first part, we're neighbors. We want to help, we want to bring our community back, but foremost in people's minds too is what happened to my property values. Did I just lose everything? What does that look like for me? And so, that's an interesting question, that we're dealing with right now. We do have buyers that, are coming in, and, it's they're expecting a deal, but it's, not outrageous. It's not 10 cents on the dollar. And there's certain people in our area that, are saying, I think I'm older. I don't want to, take 2-3 years to rebuild. I want to go ahead and move my properties. And so we are seeing sales transactions come through on a daily basis. Did you see that after your storms? I'm going to stay with you, Chris Abbott. Did you see that, after your storms, that, there was that type of buyer moving in and that type of seller ready to cut and run?
Yeah, of course. There's always people coming in as vultures to feast on what they think are going to be deals and opportunities, and they will find some because some people just don't have the means or the want to make it what it was again. If you can work it out with your insurance company and get as much as you can, and then sell the property for lower value, you might be able to be made whole. But the good news is for you guys, as the real estate market is shifting right now, you're going to have buyers coming to your market regardless of what conditions are going on. It's going to take a little while until they can make those transactions happen, but I see positive stuff for your guys' market once you get everything cleaned up.
That's good to hear. And Dana, so for your market, unfortunately, that's too bad that most people didn't have flood insurance, because that's what we're starting to see too, with these people, in their flood claims, the house got filled with water, and that's one policy. But then, did it have wind damage? That brings in another policy that these people can collect off of. So, those poor people that didn't have flood insurance, did they try to rebuild for the most part, or was it 50-50? What? You're on mute, by the way, Dana.
I think probably 30% of the total flooded houses took the insurance money. If they didn't have flood insurance, they would take what they got, and they didn't rebuild. They would sell probably 30% down and move on. But most people tried to rebuild, and they did. And then they would take out, the loans, the 2% loans to rebuild, help them on that. If you do that, you're going to have to stay in your home just a little longer before you resell, just trying to recoup that. But most people did rebuild, and we've sold all those flooded homes and resold them again. So we had a fantastic market. It looks different, I'd say 6 months after the flood, for about a year and a half. And then it started to return. Those flooded homes will sell. We just have to overcome all the concerns with the buyers. But it happens, and our market is thriving still, and we still sell homes that flooded.
That's great. And you have some advice later on that I think will be very, very helpful regarding fixing up the home. So I'm curious to hear that and excited. So Chris, Anthony, up in New Jersey area as well. How long did it take for buyers to start, or were they entering your market right away looking for hurricane deals?
They were, but Chris brought up a great point, and Dana drove it home. You got to think about the market at the time. So think about what market we were in 2012. We were just coming out of the big, huge financial crisis. The market was not nearly as strong as it is right now. The second Chris said that, I don't know if you guys could see me, but I was like a bobblehead saying, yeah, he's spot on. It's a strong market. There's people in droves wanting to be in Florida. So you're going to get that. You're going to get closer to your prices that you need. I would say to everybody that's on here, it's the hardest thing right now is to be optimistic, looking at a house that's ruined, looking at, to your point, Jeff, it's like, the 4 feet or 5 feet or 6 feet of cutout sheetrock that, and seeing a house that's half of what it was, or a shell of a house right now. I promise you it's going to get better. And it's so much better wired now, the whole system to this, because it's 10 more, in my case, 10 more years of storms and everything else. It's going to get better. To Chris's point, the values, which I'm sure we'll get into, percentage wise, back then in New Jersey, it was probably 20 to 30% discount for a storm damaged house. But then things started happening. Grants started coming in to help people lift houses. Insurance money, which was slow at first, and it always is, started to kick in, and things started to happen. We went through 5 or 6 months of sheer hell where we're thinking, oh my God, how are we going to get through this? And then all of a sudden, when things start turning, it's like this rainbow and the sun comes out, and everyone, the really cool thing was that the community really kind of rallied around each other and came together. And in a time when everyone seems to be divisive, it really made our towns come together and get stronger. So I know it's going to turn around. To Chris's point, we're in one of the best markets we've ever seen. That's going to continue. People are still going to want to move away from high taxes in the Northeast, and and weather and everything else that they're dealing with, the reason that they're coming in droves to Florida, it will help immensely with the rebuild and everything else that's going on.
That's good to hear.
Jeff, may I add something, Jeff?
Sure.
I mean, part of the discussion today is really the impact of the event on short-term values versus long-term values in the community. And part of it is having that perspective and patience, especially if you're an owner, because certainly as indicated, there are some who feel that for all the right reasons, it's time to move on. But for every one of those, there's two others that move in. And looking at kind of the history of hurricanes, not only in Florida, but across the country, in terms of the number of major storms that have occurred, the demographics suggest that in almost every case but one, the market that was most affected grew in population within the year that followed. And the National Association of Realtors have done a couple of different studies which suggest that following hurricanes, within 2 years, property values have gone up 10%. And that's been fairly consistent within a range of 5 to 10% as a whole. And we know what happens is it leads to this rebuilding boom with more expensive properties that tends to elevate everybody's remaining properties who were already there.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking about, actually, I'm going to build off of that, Budge, off the rebuilding. So, our town is obviously going to be in that phase here coming up very soon. We're, getting there. People are trying to, negotiate with their insurance companies right now. But we have obviously FEMA has a 50% rule. So if it's a pre-firm home that doesn't meet all their current codes and is severely damaged, and there's they have these percentages that they tell you about. When you saw your rebuilding, I'm gonna go back to Chris Anthony because I'm curious about the Northeast. When you saw your rebuilding, did you see codes change and people have to build to newer codes, or were they allowed to rebuild what they already had?
No, great question. And at first it scared the hell out of us, Jeff, to be honest with you, because they were saying, oh, you're not going to be able to, it's going to be a total loss. And the towns and the state stepped in and got our federal government and got real. That's why they put the grants out there so people could lift their house and bring them up to code. But as long as you were living in it as a primary, it was fine. The only issue that kind of stayed around for a while was if somebody else was coming in like an investor to buy the property and they bought the property as a storm damaged property, they had to honor the fact and they couldn't move into it and get a certificate of ownership or a certificate of occupancy until it was built to code. That was the only thing. So they thought about doing that at first, and then they kind of pulled back because they said that we don't want to put people out any more than they've already been put out.
Interesting.
Jeff, do you want to take a second? I apologize, but one of the earlier questions was trying to get clarity as to what the 50% rule means. And I don't want to assume that everybody really understands that. So perhaps that, if that could be clarified for them, that would be helpful.
Sure. Tiffany, do you want to field that one?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Are you guys able to hear me? Because I was, I just connected. Okay. Okay. So the 50%, the way that works is that if a property is not built to the required elevation for construction, then and it's damaged more than 50% of the replacement value of the assessed value of the structure or the replacement value of the structure alone, and that's a depreciated replacement value, then you're required to, or you're supposed, the thought is that you'd be required to bring it to elevation. So, as in some cases, I guess it would be lifting homes, although most of the homes here that are ground level or not built to elevation are concrete block. The foundation's not such that it can easily be just lifted. In other cases, they're trying to build on top of the ground level homes. In other cases, they're tearing down and rebuilding. But the whole idea is that they want to decrease the exposure of the federal flood insurance program by getting as many homes as they can up to elevation.
So we still have owners in our area that are kind of waiting for the final determination of what they can do with their pre-firm home. What is the final because you have little municipalities within obviously different regions, like Lee County, and then you have city of Sanibel, and you have Fort Myers Beach. So that's people. I'm curious about what happened in your towns, because we're still kind of waiting around to figure out exactly what these folks can do with their properties and what they'll be required to do. So, Chris Abbott, you're Gulf Coast Floridian. The most recent one for you was Mexico City Beach, Hurricane Michael. Well, you had the one in 2020 as well, but Mexico City Beach was severely damaged, and these codes were more than likely, for the most part, in place back in 2018 as well. So, what did you see regarding the rebuild out there, and what owners were required to do by their townships?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the homes were similar to what you guys are experiencing. They were on the ground level and close to the coastline, and they got completely wiped from their slabs. So you looked around, and it was just these empty fields where homes used to be. If there was a newer home built within the last 2 or 3 years, it was standing tall, had minimal damage, and survived. And it was shocking to see these products there when the storm was a Category 5 going through. So the cities and counties required people to build up to today's standard. And I know there were some questions on the panel about cost of construction and people coming in that want to help, but they're gouging on prices. And you have to be patient if you want to rebuild to today's standards. And in the long run, it's going to benefit you and all the surrounding area to bring it up to today. It cleans out the old, unfortunately, and makes room for the new. And I don't think we can be naive that every 10 years or so, we've had a storm here in the Panhandle. That's about the cycle for us. And I had conversations with people recently about how could you live in areas like that? Well, it's so beautiful and there's benefits. I would rather live in a hurricane-prone area than fire, earthquake, tornado. And that's just me personally, but hopefully I answered your rebuild question.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then Dana,
for the people that choose not to build up, and this would be more for the Chris's from Florida, for the people that choose not to build up and they have the value in their structure so they don't have to, are you seeing an aversion later when people go to resell, or are buyers' memories short?
Yeah, I'll go with this one first, Chris Anthony. Buyers' memories are short. So within a year's time frame, people come back in town and it's cleaned up enough they don't think much about it. Yeah, Chris Anthony, you got anything to say there?
Yeah, I do. And Chris, ironically, it was different in New Jersey. It still to this day, if there's a property that's not built up above base flood elevation, they take off that chunk of it's a different world up there because you can lift houses relatively easy up there. And what happened to the point of gouging, these house lifters, I was lucky in one sense that after my fire, I'd already made a deal with a house lifting company to lift my house. I had a relatively large house, and the deal was for $14,000 to lift my house. When the storm came through and when everything went crazy and all these house lifters came in, it was $100,000 to lift the same work, doing the same thing to that point, but it settled down. And now usually in New Jersey, this is going back a couple of years. I've been in Florida for a year and a half now, but there's a discount anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 just for the cost of what that lift would be.
Yeah, so for the onset in our market, we're seeing, it's almost a case by case basis because every home was affected a little differently. We see some homes that were elevated, but unfortunately a piece of the roof blew off or a French door blew open. And it sat there with 150-mile-an-hour winds and rain blowing in for 5 hours. And so, even though the flood didn't get to it because it met that elevation, it still sustained severe damage. And, we're seeing buyers come in, but we're seeing them, look at the interior of a home and say, okay, here's what I'm going to have to do a complete gut and remodel job on this property, start the remediation immediately. And, I'll offer you X, Y, Z. We're seeing, for a severely damaged home right now, and Tiff, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere between 50 and 60% of pre-storm value for severely damaged homes, what we're seeing buyers stomach as far as an acquisition is concerned. We're also seeing homes that basically came through, like to your point, Chris, it's amazing the new construction homes built to the newest codes that it's just, you look at one house and it looks like nothing happened. It's just unbelievable. Then the house next door that was built in 1976 is laying in a pile of rubble.
Right.
We're seeing a little bit of a premium for homes that came through basically unscathed, because we're seeing people shift. They want to buy a home on the island to stay in while they rebuild their other home that they lost. So
we've premium, when you say, Jeff, for new construction, we were already kind of seeing a little bit of that anyway, but people are willing to pay premium for new construction.
Yeah. I would just say that I'm already beginning to see that certainly in the market. And I think going forward, you're going to have this whatever discounting is going to be applicable to homes that are not meeting the minimal elevation, but it's going to coincide with a premium for the ones that are. And I think one of the things that's really interesting, especially for people that are not in the market and may have reservations about being here for the reasons everyone mentioned. And as Jeff noted, I live on a barrier island. My home is under 5 feet of water, but there was no structural damage to any home in our community. It was all a matter of going in and replacing drywall and mitigating and all that, but there was no structural damage, and everybody is back in their homes already. So it's a real testament to the logic behind the building codes and the fact that things worked actually exactly as they were intended to do in the worst case scenario.
It was amazing how much they got right, in all honesty. If you look at homes built after 2010, they perform much better than, even, homes 15, 20, they're 15, 20 years old. And it's funny because a lot of the insurance companies in Florida, as the Chris's would know, some of the bigger carriers started only accepting or giving better premiums to homes built after 2010. There must be some sort of change that came in right around that time that, they knew would be a difference maker, but it's uncanny how much they were able to predict ahead of the storm.
Yeah, I agree. Now, we're getting actually quite a few questions in the Q&A section, which I'll handle most of them at the end, but thank you for your questions, and we'll try to get to most of them, but there's a few that are pertinent right now. So when we talk about the rebuild process and the permitting process, we're going to have just an influx of people in our area flood these permitting offices with applications for remodel, rebuild, rehab, what have you. Did you notice in your areas a really big backlog before people could even get the permits to start? And Chris, since you're a Gulf Coast Floridian, I'm gonna start. Chris Abbott, I'm gonna start with you. Did you notice a big backlog and kind of a stopgap in permitting where people had to sit for a while before they could start rebuilding?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously time's of the essence if you can get through with your insurance company on what you decide to do with your house. But the sooner you can get with your city or county on getting permits to be able to rebuild, the better, because everyone else is doing the same thing. And the longer you wait, the longer it can backlog. They've only got so many people in the municipalities that can do the work. So the sooner you can get to it, the better time you'll have to get started rebuilding.
And another question, which is interesting to me, is it's an interesting question too. Now, if people do wait, because right now everybody's rebuilding, so material costs have gone up. The contractors are inching their prices up. If people do wait, let's say 6 months, a year, and then decide to do that, then did you notice a decline in the costs up to rehab or remodel? Did that come back down, or did they just stay up at that level?
I think the people who come at the beginning, they're looking to help those that want it done right now, piecing houses together. So they're charging max amount because no one else is there to help. So if you do wait, I think there's more resources that you can have access to, and the cost can come down. The difference, like Chris said about the market and timing, is a lot of things are more expensive now, and they can't get materials, and it's harder just in general without having the hurricane. So you're faced with dealing with just market conditions and supply chain issues all by itself.
That's interesting. Now, Dana, you said 200,000 homes were flooded in your area, which is an amazing amount, unfortunately. Now, obviously you're a bigger city, so more people working in the municipalities, but did you see a big backlog of permits and people having to wait before they could finally start work on their home?
We did. Yes, we did. There's certain things you can do without a permit because ours was, again, all water. It was all water damage. So you could do a lot of things without the permit, but it was such an influx of people coming in, trying to do the work. You know, all these new little companies popped up, which you have no background. You really don't know who they are. And I think that's one thing you want to be careful of. I would tell sellers out there, if you are doing that, be sure you know who you're using. But that will creep up in a couple of years to say, who was that? Who did the work? But we did see it. They eventually, in a few months, got it all straightened out and things started to work quickly, those that were going to rebuild. But it was so widespread, it wasn't all coming out of one office. That's the thing.
Interesting.
So
now, Chris,
Dana, when she was doing her, when we were talking yesterday, was talking about being careful of some of the homes that came to market right after the flood too, that there was,
right.
They weren't paying just because they looked restored,
Right.
some of the problems behind the scenes.
Right. You got to be very careful. And that is a buyer, that will be your buyers, for the sellers out there, that will be your buyer's biggest concern, is who did the work, and things to keep in mind. I'm sure you'll ask later, but just while we're talking about it, is who is doing this remediation? Is it a company that popped up all of a sudden? Everybody wants to be the hero and they're going to come and act like they do this. They don't have a background. But I don't know what it's like where you are, but in our state, they can do that. They can do a DBA. So be careful. And even if it, let's say Service King comes in and does something, you know, they're well known, but you'll have everybody, and you probably are seeing everybody from other states coming in. That doesn't necessarily mean they're under the umbrella of that big, well-known company. And just keep good records, because those tend to get lost throughout the years. And, you know, 3 years later, a buyer's going to want to know who did this work. Oh, it was Service King. All you got to do is call them. They'll have the record. They don't. We have been through that a lot.
That's really interesting. And
Yeah.
Chris Anthony, did you see that in Northeast too? A lot of fly-by-night come in and do the work, and that affected the property's value when they went to sell in a couple of years' time?
A ton. And that was going to be one of my quick tips for everybody, was to really, you know, the good thing is we can research everything on our phones right now. You know what I mean? Just like look up the history, be 100% sure about it. Even, you know, and I might be jumping ahead, but my biggest tip, I would say, was because when I had my fire, I was just distraught and beaten down, and I kind of just signed off on something, on whatever the insurance company decided they were going to give me the first time. And then after the flood, I was like, hell no, because I had to go to my pocket for a lot. And then once the flood happened, I literally drilled down on everything, and to the point I then brought in a very recognized insurance adjuster who was a local person that I knew through friends of friends, and I did my research, and I got every penny that was coming to me. So that would be the thing that I would really highly recommend. But to your point, yes, and there's no way to stop that. Even if Dana mentioned, you know, respectfully, whether they can or whether they can't in a state, they're going to come anyways. And there's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be people that are taking advantage, because there always are. And it's like the low-lying fruit kind of thing. Just be, even though you're in a super emotional time right now, the biggest piece of advice I would give you is just do your homework. And you can ask around and talk to your local representatives, talk to people that you know within the fabric of your community. And usually if you do a little bit of research and you do your homework, you'll find the right people.
You spoke about public adjusters and insurance, and I'm going to jump up to Chris Abbott here. So Chris, you know, we're talking to customers daily who are working with their insurance companies. If some of them are getting initial offers of settlement that is not meeting their expectations, what did you see as far as your customers there and the negotiations with the insurance companies? Did they have to go back and forth? Did they have to hire? Did they do better if they hired a public adjuster or an attorney to represent them for the most part? You know, what did you experience?
I think so, because you have someone with experience that's helping guide you through the process, where you can make emotional decisions and not really know what to do, because it feels hopeless at times with what's gone on. So if you've got a second opinion or someone that can help you, I would definitely have their voice be a part of it. And what you realize is what insurance companies who have the local adjusters and people on the ground, how quickly some people were able to get the estimates and push through and get their money versus others. And I'm not saying that's how you're going to choose your insurance in the future, but it was very eye-opening to me who was able to get it done at the local level and who wasn't. But I would have someone help for sure.
What were you saying? What were you saying
Absolutely.
from a timing standpoint when people would finally get their actual check in hand from their insurance company? Was it 60 days out? Was it 120 days out? What were you seeing on average back in 2018?
Yeah. I mean, some were 60 to 90 days, and others were 6 months, and that's based on what I was saying, who the adjuster was and how quickly we were able to get to it. So if you don't like the way that the process has gone, and you think that there's more value there, do your best to be patient. Just some people don't have the luxury, and they've got to make decisions right away. Everyone's situation is different. So just having someone else there to help you, I think can benefit the emotional component of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice. So now from back to the real estate perspective on this. So I'm going to switch over to you, Dana, here. So if people, let's say we, in our market, we have a certain, just percentage of people, it's just, everybody's different, that just says, I'm kind of done with the Gulf Coast, and, I'm moving on and I want to sell my house. And, we actually do have a little sub market here, but like we said earlier, it's got to be, at a little bit of a discount here. What was the timing in your market? Because I'm really curious about a big city, because we're a little bit more spread out. We're not as big, way as big of a city. How long did it take for buyers to come in, and when did property values start to get back to their pre-storm norm?
Well, ours turned around pretty quickly. Those that were going to walk away, those decisions were made probably within 3 to 6 months. And so that started happening. And really, they weren't a 50% discount. At that time in 2017, it was, I would say, anywhere between 30 to 40, depending on the damage, if it's a 1-story or if there's a 2-story. So that happened pretty quickly. People were making decisions. And then those homes, all homes are going to be redone, no matter what, no matter who buys them, it's going to be redone. And if it's an investor, they're going to flip it. And that started happening anywhere between 4 and 6 months after that. So 8 months after the storm, we had a lot of homes on the market to sell, things that had been redone, things that hadn't been redone. And the homes that had been redone were a little bit elevated in value, but you do have some buyers that will come in and buy those, because everybody has to have shelter. And I think that that will eventually help your market, because it's going to help the appraisal value of homes like that. So I would say a year, we started seeing a market that looked a little familiar. And then 2-year mark, we were rocking and rolling. Absolutely. We're back. Now that we're 5 years out, obviously, I will tell you, our market, everybody's market's been great, but our market's been great, but we still have those questions. Did it flood? That will not, it'll be a long time before that goes away.
Right.
So we just have to address those concerns. You have to have those answers that they're going to ask a lot.
Now, Chris, Anthony, you mentioned something I found kind of interesting that, and I didn't even put this, I did put it together, but it was something that kind of you reminded me of is, Superstorm Sandy hit in 2012. And, 2010 to 2012 range was, where I feel the bottom of our real estate market was. That was the, the big real estate depression that, we were struggling through. Did, by some means, and I'm not meaning to make light of it, did the storm coming through help re-energize your market? Was there a sub-market for investors coming in and, buying distressed properties?
Yeah, great point. It did. And it was just starting to be the point where we were really coming out of the funk that was literally started in 2008, and just, it was a lot, it was a lot of growth happening, but it just was the beginning of it. And I thought about that one time, and I was talking about it one time, and I think that is a valid thing, Jeff. I think it gave just a little nudge to people to kind of open up their wallets and start spending. In New Jersey, it took a little bit longer to get to the point that Dana was just talking about. If hers was 1 year to 2 years, ours was probably 2 to 3 years. But then an amazing thing happens and Budge mentioned it earlier, and very eloquently he said that, with the exception of one market, the law of averages is that you're going to get a 10% lift. All of a sudden, it's like everything has lipstick on it. The whole town looks better, and everything starts to go from like this woe is us, and everyone was driving around with this Superstorm Sandy stickers on there that the town gave us to allow you to cross the bridge 6 months later. And 3 years later, people were still stuck in that mode and still had those stickers on. And we were kind of like, rip those off. Look what's going on around us. And then we started to get pumped up. And as a guy that ran a real estate company in that area for a while, to see that it was a breath of fresh air. And yeah, it happens, and it happens quickly. To Budge's point and what Chris and I were saying early, I think that you guys are going to have the benefits of that a lot sooner, a lot quicker. I think that there's investors around the world right now that are looking and saying, all right, I'm going to buy into that. And anytime, it's the law of supply and demand. If a lot of people want to do that, it's the asking price is going to go up. So I'm really bullish on what's going to happen with your guys' market. Obviously there's a lot of variables that go into it, but it looks to me like it's gonna bounce back quickly, and I'm hoping and praying for you guys.
Oh, thanks.
And let me just add, Jeff, if I could, because there was one of the questions posed was when I made the comment about what was the one market where property values did not increase within the 2 years following, because it is a singular event, and that was New Orleans after Katrina, and that was primarily driven by the mass exodus of people that left New Orleans and moved to places like Houston and others and never returned. So you had a demographic shift, but that's not what is typical in these events. And we're already experiencing the fact that we have people coming in that want to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Well said.
And there's people too, and what we're seeing too is people are able to, still keep their insurance benefits, sell their property. And I know I think it was maybe Chris Abbott mentioned it earlier, come out close to a whole, if they, sell a damaged home and then keep their insurance benefits. And, it's not, we're not seeing, like I said, that the 10 cents on the dollar, we're seeing homes, that are going to need hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in work, still sell for, what we feel is a reasonable price, and our sellers are pretty happy with it. So, for the most part, but so, now jump to.
Can I ask, I'm just curious, and maybe there weren't a lot of condos, but it seems like condos and homes are kind of, because the homes are able to make quick recovery. I mean, they can make decisions. They don't need a committee to make decisions essentially, but the condos are still sitting 2 months out without power. And some of the condo associations are being told, don't expect power till sometime in the spring. Did you guys have large condo towers or condo buildings in your markets? And how was their recovery? Was it similar to the houses?
I guess we'll start with.
Yeah, I mean, we got plenty here. Sorry to cut you off, Jeff.
No, that's fine.
If your building is without power for that period of time, get the things that you want out of there, and you're just going to have to wait, and it sucks. Mold, everything inside gets ruined, and the kind of buildings that can get up sooner, then you've got that chance. But it's luck of the draw or not. That's what we experienced here in the Panhandle.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see condo towers sit for months and months without power in Panama City as well?
It was 30 days was probably the most. I mean, they work on getting power lines up first, right? So in this time of year, you may be okay, as opposed to if it was done in July. So maybe the temperatures will work in your favor. And just to parlay again with the market, going into the spring market for you guys, you've got 4 months or so. I think it's going to bode well for sales and activity. That's when a lot of the activity is, especially in our market and in the state of Florida. So I'm not trying to be overly optimistic for you guys, but I think your timing is going to be good as you get things cleaned up.
Gotcha.
Jeff, do you want to, there was a question since you were talking about condos, Tiffany, that what is happening, the value of condos that are beachfront or undergoing, and I know that there are some that in this particular question, they reference undergoing structural remediation. And I don't know if that's intended to be more than simply replacing first floor damage, fixing elevators and common areas. But what values can be expected after renovations, and how would you compare the demand for condos post hurricanes versus single family homes?
I don't know if I could say value-wise. I mean, Hurricane Opal, all the first floor condos, there was sand 4 or 5 feet. All the furniture and everything was pushed through to the front door, and it took a while to dig those buildings out. But older structures were put back together, painted nice, and the values maintained or went up because it was all redone and all cleaned up. So the kind of thing you have to be more patient because, like Tiffany said, it's a committee of people making those decisions.
One thing that I think is going to be working in our favor is the Lee County Travel and Tourism Board did a study. I think it was 2015. They commissioned a study, and they wanted to know why property values and rental values in our area lagged some other areas in Florida. And one of the things that they determined was that our building boom on Santa Monica was primarily the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and a lot of our inventory was dated, and it didn't have the widespread, new amenities and features that renters were wanting. And so I think this is going to be a reset, a chance to get it right. And as a whole, with a lot of all the money that's coming here, investment money, grant money, insurance money, to build new again, build better. And I think we're going to hopefully all benefit, from that in the long run. If you can take the long view, the next, few months and years may be a little bit bumpy, but in the long view, I think they'll be better off for that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a rising tide raises all boats, so, when all these smaller properties that were a little older, a little dated, are being, unfortunately forced to remodel, rehab, but, some with insurance funds that maybe, that money wouldn't have been available in that community previously, in the long view, I agree with you, Tiffany. I think that's going to help property values as a whole. So the long view is something that I'm curious about, and I'm going to start with Chris Anthony here. So what did I know every market's different, every storm is different. What does long view mean to you? At what point and what time frame after the landfall of Superstorm Sandy did you say, wow, okay, things are better, and this is good? Yeah.
It was a bare minimum of 2 years, and thinking back, it was probably closer to 3 years before it really got good. And you're gonna. But by the way, if the question panel on here is fantastic, and there's some really good questions. I was just reading from George and Donna, I believe Repa. And they were asking about, how do you know as a buyer now going into storm damaged properties what to do? And this is all gonna start to take shape, and this is more and more reason why you need a really intelligent real estate professional who has the tentacles to know really good home inspectors and mold remediation people and things like that. So I'm just going to keep battering this because it was the one thing that I wish I did better was more research, be smarter about my decisions that I make. But lean on Jeff and Tiffany and anyone that you're using in the area to tell you and advise you with good people, because good home inspectors, not every home inspector is a good home inspector, right? And mold remediation people the same way. So you're going to have to really consciously be sharp about that when you're going into these storm damaged houses. But I think, and I'm not sure how they do it on the West Coast, so I don't want to speak out of form. I don't know if you guys work with COs, and if you're, you have to have a CO in order to sell the house after a storm and things like that. So I don't know what the checks and balances are, but lean on Jeff and Tiffany and Budge and local people to do that. That's my recommendation. But yeah, Jeff, sorry, that's my ADHD kicking in, because I was reading that and I thought it's so important to talk about that. So I wanted to mention that. But it was 3 years, but I'm telling you, it's like I've said it a couple of times, and I don't mean like Chris said, we're kind of eternal optimists, I guess. But the reality is we've lived through this, and we're telling our stories, not to bore you guys to death with war stories or anything, but to let you know that the reality of this is that there is a rainbow on the other side of this. It's going to get better. I promise you. And I really honestly believe it's going to get better a lot quicker where you are than where some storms have hit prior. And I think Chris and Dana both feel the same. Don't you guys?
Absolutely.
I would agree.
Dana, what was your, I guess, if we said long view, in the long view, things are going to get better. What in your market after Harvey, what do you call long view? What do you think?
I'd say 2 years, really. By 19, we really, it was when people start rebuilding and you start seeing that, and that those homes starts coming on the market, that's when it really starts turning, because people see that and are encouraged by that. And it's a whole new look, like everybody was saying. Your whole market looks different, and homes that were selling for 500,000 have been redone, and now they're selling for 700,000. You know, it's just it, and it's only gone up from there. So I think the faster, and it sounds like your area is already moving quickly to rebuild, pull out, remediate, being smart about the mold remediation, which is big when you have a water event. That's the first thing people are going to ask. It depends on the damage. How long was it aired out, and what chemicals were used, and who did the mold remediation? Those are big questions that we still see today on homes. But it was really 2 years, and it only went up from there. Our prices have continued to go up and raise and hold value. We never really lost value. And I feel like that's probably your area also, because you have a lot of things going for y'all in that area.
And Chris Abbott, I recently read an article actually focused on Mexico City Beach, and I think it was before our hurricane, talking about their recovery process and the fact that, you know, just what we're discussing here, that all the new inventory has really helped property values I'm not going to use the word skyrocket, but, you know, substantially improve in that area. Is that what you saw personally, and how long did that take, you know, your long view?
Yeah, so it's a minimum of 6 months just to get things cleaned up. After a year, you start seeing things rebuilt, and then I'll go on the same 2-year path. As Chris and Dana have said, the government, they gave developers some tax incentives to develop some of the areas that had been damaged. So when those things are put in place, you'll see some people put a little more manpower behind areas that have the opportunity to regrow. But I'm on the same time frame. It's a minimum of 6 months till you start seeing the light, and 2 years till you really start seeing the values. And we saw them all increase as well, because it was better construction and better properties.
Can I ask a follow-up question, kind of that, because it's something that we're getting a lot, is a lot of people, they can kind of imagine how the residential recovery might go, but their big concern is that all of these, because we, especially the islands, they're mom and pop businesses, their chains are not allowed unless they were grandfathered. And so they're worried, how are these businesses survive this when the condos, a lot of them, they're saying don't plan on renting until 2023, 2024, who knows? And so how did your businesses survive? How long did it take for them to recover?
You know, I can, if you guys don't mind, I'll jump in on this one, only because very similar towns, despite the fact that it's New Jersey versus Florida. Seaside Park, Seaside Heights is a really just a whole different beast in itself. It was really, it's just everyone comes down from New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and everyone spends a couple days or a week down there. So it's a real touristy town, and it's all local business and it's small business. It took a while. Some candidly fell off, but when, to Chris's point, when the government comes in and helps out, and they did some different business loans, the SBA was great. There were some SBA loans that many people took advantage of. And again, to that point, there's some businesses that they had a cold winter, that's for sure. But then it got better, and it got better quick. And as the demographics of the town and different things started happening, there was more money coming into the town. And to that 2-year mark, 2 years later, it was flowing, and people wanted to come back and come back stronger and help out local businesses more than ever. I have a friend that owned a surf shop in Seaside Park, and Mike was devastated and concerned with, you know, that was his income, and that's how he paid for his children to eat. And we all collectively, you know, joined him and did some things for him and helped him. But ultimately, he came back stronger than ever. And he's, you know, he's, knock on wood, still there to this day, and still selling surfboards and surf lessons and doing great for our community.
How long was he out of business without customers before he could come back online?
I mean, it was luckily, you know, he doesn't do a ton of business in the winter because it's really a summer heavy area. But that first summer he was down, I think he said 60 or 70% because just people weren't back in their houses yet. So that the people that were normally there, his consistent clientele, weren't there. The following summer, he killed it though. So it took a year and a half, but the following summer he came back, and, you know, Mike is still there, you know, doing really well, which made me really happy personally, but it will come around. The SBA loans will help immensely.
Yeah, we're seeing restaurants finally starting to open here on our island, and you know, I know as a community, we mentioned it earlier. You know, when something like this happens, it really makes you feel a sense of your community because everybody comes together for a common purpose, and that's just to come through this and all together and come out better on the other side. But you know, I know the restaurants that are starting to open up right now, we're, you know, definitely going to try to frequent, you know, just to give them a little help because, you know, if I'm going to have dinner, I might as well support a local restaurant. And
yeah, Jeff, you're going to see that more and more too as you go along and as it grows.
Right.
It's one of the coolest parts. One of my 14 saying coolest, but it really was a unique thing, and it made us all feel really good. Is that sense of family that happens when we've grown to be so divisive, and with social media and everything else, you're going to see a camaraderie of people, and it gives you hope for the human spirit and our future, because it's going to happen. I promise you. And just maybe shoot us a text at some point 6 months from now, and you have good experiences like that, because it's going to warm you and it's going to make your community stronger. I promise you.
That's good to hear. So yep. I think we're getting a lot of good questions in. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with everybody, is I'd like maybe to jump to each one of you for, you know, I know I emailed this to you a few days ago for, you know, what is the helpful tips, advice, anything you can give our area, our property owners on what to do, what not to do. I know we've already touched on some of them, but, you know, any last thoughts on and advice on what you wish you'd have known when you were going through, you know, what we're experiencing right now. And I'll start with up at the top of my screen. I know probably everybody's screen is different. I'll start with Chris Abbott. Chris, do you have any additional advice for us?
Yeah, I think just talking to as many people as you can and having those who've got experience help with the adjustment part and the insurance part, because people will try to move things through quickly. And if you don't like the values you're getting, then seek help in doing it. Help those around your community. Chris Anthony said it. You will not feel another opportunity like this to come together. So help your fellow neighbor, as hard as it may be. And when you're through all of this, you'll have some new bonds, and then just stay as positive as you can, right? The plus here is, as the real estate market shifting, you guys are in an area that's going to grow and people are going to want to be at. So I feel like after you get through the clean out stage of all the stuff there, you guys are going to see some real growth and opportunity.
Okay, so Dana, same question. You already touched a little bit on this with some really great advice of be careful who you use for remediation,
right.
The contractor, make sure you research them. Any other advice that you wish or you'd like to impart on us? Or
well, I would just implore everybody to take a deep breath before they make any major decisions, because you're still in the trauma time period. So just take a breath and talk to your experts there, everybody that you've been dealing with. And same thing, look down the road 2 years, it will all turn around. And what do you need to make sure you're whole in 2 years. Like I'll go back to not just to make sure you know who you're dealing with. Make sure you keep records written and online, because they will get lost. Buyers will always come back. You'll need to know how much water was in there, how long it sat, what chemicals were used to remediate, and do you have a mold report? Those are every question that your future buyer will ask, no matter how far away from a flood, if they know it's been flooded. And it's the more information you can provide 2 years from now, the better it will, an easier transaction you'll have when everybody wants to build a bigger house with your agent. That's what I would say.
Good advice. And Chris Anthony,
I kind of snuck out what my advice was earlier, but and I'll stick to that. But Chris just said something that hits home, you know. And I, having lived through two different events like this, where a loss of house and home, there's a you know, not getting religious at all, but more spiritual. there's a quote that says you're more blessed to give than to receive. And it's the hardest time right now to think that way. And to put it in perspective, when your house is gone, when all your personal belongings are gone, or you've been damaged to the extent that you guys have. But Chris said it and really well. It's help your neighbor, help people around you. And it's amazing what that will do to kind of put things in perspective and get your life back together, because there's always someone out there that was hit harder. There's people that lost life in this storm, and that to me is the ultimate loss, so just rally around each other, and you're going to have times when your patience are tried and when you're angry. And I wish I was a complete gentleman at every moment, but there were times when I was yelling at the top of my lungs at 11 p.m. and, mad at the world. But when you look back on it, you say, you know what, everything ended up turning out really well. And if this is the worst that ever happens in my life, God bless us, Yeah,
that's great. So I'm going to jump to questions now and just pose a few of them. And I apologize to those who are submitting questions if we can't get to them all, because we have quite a few. But I'm just going to grab a few of them here. So both two people have submitted basically the same question, Bob and Dave, and they asked, about insurance. Now, after the storms in your area, did you notice insurance costs rising in your area? Chris, I'm going to go to you for Mexico City Beach and Panama and Florida, since we're in Florida as well. Did your insurance rates in your community on a whole jump up quite a bit after those storms?
They did not jump up because you rebuilt with new materials. So insurance companies were more willing to take the risk with the up to code properties. Now, if you had something existing, document what you have when you're fixing it up so that you can share that information with the insurance company. But we didn't see large shifts in rates. But the landscape by itself, Jeff, today, insurance was already increasing. Companies were consolidating. So it's hard to say it could be storm related, when it may have just been happening all on its own in the state.
Okay. And so Deanne asked to the panel, was there anything that stood out to you as surprising from the rebuild reselling areas? Anything that caught you off guard from going through the rebuild process? And actually, we have to touch on that, and I'm gonna go to you, Dana, here. We have people asking quite a few questions here about the permitting process and how long it's going to take to start their rebuild of their homes. It seems like we have, quite a few people wondering, what is that going to look like, and when can I actually start getting hammers swinging in my house and get back to normal? What happened in your, what was the timing where you could see most people actually get those contractors in there and start working?
We saw relatively quickly. There's people that started within 6 weeks.
Wow.
As long as they had their mold remediation all in place, they got people in quick, then they could actually start sheetrocking back up and doing things. They did quick. And then some people were on waiting lists because there just was not enough people, and it sat for 6 months before they started redoing. And you may think, oh, is that negative? It's not always negative if the house sits that long, because in a buyer's mind, they think, oh, well, great, it aired out a lot. It's funny what you can only imagine what a buyer would think. So if there's water in there, they want it to be completely dry. But our permitting did not have a backup until you started to have to get electrical permits and things like that. Those took a little longer because they would come out and inspect it.
And Jeff, may I add to that? I think there needs to be a delineation between the work that requires permitting versus not. In many cases with, like, for example, my home with the first floor underwater, it's non-conforming. It's meant to be garage space and other things. We have utilities, we have AC units, we have electrical. We were not changing anything. You're simply repairing and restoring. Mm-hmm. It did not require a permit to do that work. So we were able to move very quickly versus somebody that's looking at a substantial change or alteration to the home. Then they have to go through the permitting process.
Right. Permits and inspections are two different categories. So not everybody needs a permit.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Now, Chris, Anthony, you were on an island. Sounds pretty similar because we had a bay and a gulf, and they were one for about 3 hours, I guess. But over our islands. So what did the rebuild timing look like for you? Because it sounds like you had a similar level of damage that we have, where it's going to be a significant amount of people applying for permits and needing the same materials and things like that.
Yeah, I wish I could have better news for you. Our island was locked down for months. And the only thing that was allowed was at sunup, remediation companies could come in, and at sundown, everyone had to be off the island. So it took way longer than hopefully it will for you guys. 6 months before the island really opened back up, and then all the real work started getting done. The permit process was, and I don't even want to speak to it because I can't speak intelligently about, what's going on the west coast of Florida as far as the permitting process, but it was a pain. But one of the reasons that people are moving down here from states like New Jersey is because government is so slow up there compared to Florida, where, God bless us, we have a lot quicker acting government down here than we had up there. So I think that is going to speed things up as well. Those are just guesses though, but our process was a very long, drawn out process. But again, everyone kind of came along, and to Chris's point, the people that had to sell immediately sold immediately, and the people that could ride it out smartly rode it out, and their property values went up drastically. That's
great. Well, I think that is about everything that we wanted to cover here at this panel meeting. I can't thank you guys enough for taking time out. I know this has been almost an hour and a half of your time, and I know we're all busy, but to add your insight, expertise, and experience, and just words of comfort, actually, for even myself, I can personally thank you guys, because it is difficult right now, but we do see the light at the end of the tunnel, and to know that you've experienced this, and you know for a fact that light at the end of the tunnel will be there, actually helps a lot. So again, Chris Abbott, Dana, Chris Anthony, thank you so much. Budge, is there anything you'd like to close with?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity and everyone's expertise as well. I know there were a lot of insurance questions that we probably didn't get to in depth, and part of it is out of abundance of caution, simply because of not being experts. I do know, of course, not only navigating the insurance side of it, but part of it, there's naturally going to be questions because of potential tax implications that are there as well, such as in most federal disaster areas, the IRS declares that you can essentially determine the value of your property before the event, and then what the value of the property is after the event, generally through a licensed appraiser, and calculate that difference. Now and actually have it as a deduction, but it also takes into account it has to be in excess of 10% of your income. So there's some complexity to it, but that's just one other aspect. And of course, you can't declare things for which you were insured. It's only uninsured losses. Mm-hmm. But there's some people on this, for example, on this webinar, for whom that may apply. So there are some variety of things out there that are a little more complicated, but they're certainly worth looking into as you evaluate all the ways you can approach this and make the most out of a very unfortunate situation.
Good point. Thank you, Budge.
Regarding that, the casualty and how those should be handled, kind of best practices, that we have a local accountant that's putting together what you need to know kind of crash course document to get for us. He said I'll have it ready for us next week, and that we can send out to people. So anybody on this list that's interested can shoot us an email, and we will get them that document.
Excellent.
Well, everybody, I can't thank you guys enough, and best of luck to you. Happy holidays. I can't believe it's already December. It's I'm sure time is kind of a weird thing for us right now, but we're I wish you guys the best. And again, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun, and I, for one, really, really took away a lot, enjoyed it.
Thank you guys. Hang in there.
Thank you. Good luck.
Jeff and Tiffany, thanks for putting this together. This was amazing. You guys are great. Keep the faith, guys. You guys are going to get there. Yep. Promise. Thanks. Great seeing everybody.
Sure will. Bye.